Here are the rules for how to use try and catch. First, any code that you think might throw an exception should be wrapped in a try block. And then that try block should be followed by one or more catch blocks. How do you know code might throw an exception? You need to know the code. If all you're doing is formatting some strings, what could possibly go wrong? But if that code is going to try to open a file, maybe the file doesn't exist anymore, maybe the user doesn't have permission to open it, even though they had permission to browse to it and tell you its name. If that code's going to do a calculation, is there a way it could divide by 0? Is there a way that it could suffer a numeric overflow or underflow? If it's going to deal with a collection, is it guaranteed by the structure of your loop to go through only the bounds of the collection, or could it get out of range? It's your judgment to know that your code might throw an exception, and that'll probably include reading the documentation for the functions that you're calling. Remember, you want to have your catch as close to the problem as possible, but don't put a try catch if there's nothing you can do when you run into trouble. If you're deep in the bowels of some business logic and you're going to catch an out-of-range exception, what are you going to do about that? Now, maybe you'll throw a different exception that's more appropriate to your circumstances to gather more information to the code that called you, but maybe you've got nothing to say. In that case, you shouldn't have a try-catch here. Don't interfere, and whoever called you can have a try-catch, and they'll deal with the problem. You can have as many catch blocks as you like, as long as you have at least one, and go off the more specific ones first when you have exception hierarchies. And although in theory you don't have to have exception hierarchies, I consider it to be a best practice to do so. Another best practice is to catch exceptions by reference. I did that in the demo without explaining it. Now I will show you why that's the right thing to do. So in general, your code's going to look like this. You have a try, in which bad things might happen, and this may call down, 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 down. It may be 6 function calls away that the bad thing might happen, but putting a try in, you're saying, I know what to do if something goes wrong. Then you catch a most derived exception, possibly a less derived exception, like the exception class in the standard library from which all these exceptions I'm using derive. And you react appropriately. That may mean that you go back around again on a loop. It may mean that you put up a message to the user. It may mean that you completely bail on the application, but perhaps you give people a chance to save their information first. That will depend on the application that you're writing.